Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Dave Henderson. I'm the program manager for our modeling and sim programs in the Office of Nuclear Energy, modeling and simulation. You'll hear me abbreviate that as ModSim. Just don't get confused. That's modeling and simulation. We have a number of scopes that are related to this area. And so I'll be giving a little bit of an overview of the modeling and simulation program or programs in the Office of Nuclear Energy, and I will then go into the scopes that pertain to this area. Just a little bit of an overview of organization. So we fall within the NE-5, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Reactor Fleet and Advanced Reactor Deployment, and my programs are in the Office of Nuclear Energy Technologies. You have my contact info here, and it will be in the information provided after as well. In this organization, we also, the modeling and simulation programs are part of the NEAT, Nuclear Energy Enabling Technologies program line, and we are also heavily work with the reactor technologies and the fuel cycle programs as well. So historically, and to the present, our modeling and simulation programs, there are two. One is the Nuclear Innovation Hub for modeling and simulation. You also hear that referred to as the CASTLE. That's the consortium that runs that hub for the department. This was and is a program focused on light water reactor technologies. Then we also have the Nuclear Energy Advanced Modeling and Simulation program. That program has been focused on non-light water reactor technologies. So when I refer to advanced reactors, I'm typically referring to non-light water reactor technologies. I say that these programs have historically been separate because starting this next year in 2020, the hub program will go away. It's received what we expect to be its last year of funding in 2019. That will carry into 2020 when the 10-year period for the hub is to end in June of 2020. In preparation for that, we've been working for quite some time to look at the light water reactor scopes of work for modeling and simulation that really need to continue into the future. And so the two teams have worked well to identify that scope and fold it into the single program going forward, Nuclear Energy Advanced Modeling and Simulation. But that program in the future will include light water and non-light water reactor work. So these are the three main areas of the Office of Nuclear Energy's mission that the modeling and simulation programs support. The existing fleet, advanced reactor pipeline, and fuel cycle infrastructure. And I'll go into at least the first two of these in more detail here next. So for the existing fleet, we're really looking at operational kinds of issues, ways that we can improve the operational performance, the economics, ultimately, of the existing fleet. So we're very interested in those problems that are of high interest to the industry, to utilities, to vendors especially. Focuses a lot on fuel and reactor core performance issues. You see some identified here, and solutions that we've been looking to address. We also have been working on accident tolerant fuels for quite some time. Both the Advanced Reactor NEAMS program and the hub have both used the Bison modeling tool for fuel performance aspects. And so we will continue to do research in this area, especially in accident tolerant fuels. So some of these concepts are significantly different than the existing light water reactor fuel, and may need more modeling and simulation support, whereas current fuels, the industry has very tried and true tools for licensing and performance kinds of issues. So we look to the industry to kind of help guide us in where we should invest further there in the future. On the advanced reactor side, we see a much larger role for advanced modeling and simulation. And when I say advanced modeling and simulation, I'm typically talking about multi-scale and multi-physics modeling. So the reason being, there's much less infrastructure, both physical infrastructure and modeling and simulation history to go on and to rely on as some of these advanced reactor technologies try to design, license, and ultimately build. So we see a critical role in accelerating the design and deployment of those reactors. In some cases, there are unique features of those reactors that if you were to use existing tools that are out there, you may not be able to examine in full detail all the aspects of your design, or as you go toward licensing, being able to make use of the safety features of those designs. So we're really trying to reduce the time for licensing applications to the NRC and try to enhance the potential for successful commercialization. I wanted to give a couple of examples, collections of modeling and simulation codes to really highlight for folks proposing. This is something that comes up quite frequently. We'd like to minimize the proliferation of additional codes and really try to focus work under these NEAP scopes into developing models that can be folded into these codes that already exist, or else we end up with too many animal names to even keep track of. This slide here is actually taken from a Nuclear Regulatory Commission presentation. They have started to look at and actually have put a report out in late April identifying the computer codes that they would see themselves using for advanced reactor analysis from a safety perspective. They would not use all of these codes at once, but they describe this as a suite of codes that they think would give them the capability to model the different reactor types that they foresee. Not all of these are fully developed. Obviously, that's a large part of what the program is working, and we are prioritizing these codes because they're of interest, high interest, and to the NRC, and that they plan to use them. The ones in blue are the ones that we're actively developing within the nuclear energy modeling and simulation programs. This is another list. This is not exclusive, but if you see these codes, if you're proposing to use these codes or fold your models into these codes, that will definitely help us, as these are really the focus going forward, especially for advanced reactors. But many of them, some of them can be used for light water reactors as well. So I just wanted to give an example of what we're talking about when we talk about multi-scale and multi-physics. The program is focusing on trying to take insights at the atomistic level and translate that into actual engineering performance codes. So here you see that going from an atomistic level, what's happening at that scale, translating it into a mesoscale model in the case of Marmot. So this is the fuels example, and then taking that, how does that actually affect how the fuel performs? We are really looking to have those lower length scale analyses develop reduced order models that can be used in faster performing codes at the engineering scale. So getting into the scopes, the actual scopes in this CI&R call. So the first one is the NEAMS-1, and this is seeking a generalized approach to multi-group cross sections. So this is addressing the fact that in the past or to date, to run your core simulations, you'll need to generate multi-group cross-section libraries, but those are very specific to one particular point in time, one particular design, and if anything changes, those libraries may have to be regenerated anew. So we're really looking for the development of something that could be more flexible, a more flexible technique that doesn't require the regeneration of cross-section every time something changes. Think of inserting a plate or a baffle in a reactor, a generalized technique or methodology to be able to handle that on the fly. At this point, I also wanted to note that as I go through these slides, this should not, these are not a complete rehash of what is in the scopes of work that are written in the call. So please pay attention to that. It's got much more detail. What I'm seeking to do here is highlight some specific things that we are looking to emphasize or avoid, as the case may be. I'll be folding these into any edits to the scope in the next week or so, where we may need to give some of this specificity. But in this area, just looking at the scope, in addition to coming up with this technique or methodology for these multi-group cross sections, we want to see it demonstrated on a realistic test problem. So there's some examples given here and in the scope. We'd also intend to see the results or the demonstration of this technique or methodology compared against multiple Monte Carlo snapshots at different conditions and time steps. So the second scope is NEAMS-2. This is near wall gas flow correlations in pebble bed. So this is the gas flow through the porous media. The approximation of that is central to the design and licensing of gas reactors. In particular, the flow near the wall and its interaction with the bypass flow is a particularly it's something that has not been modeled and validated at high resolution. So really with this scope of work, we're looking for folks to develop a test to be able to model and capture the high resolution data for such gas flow near the wall. We're really looking for these experimental investigations to have high resolution and spatiotemporal resolved measurement techniques, so that we're getting really high quality data that we can use for these high fidelity simulations. So the next scope of work in this area is the NEAMS-3 scope. And this is on molten salt chemistry modeling. This is a particular area where we feel that we need to make significant progress in very short order. The molten salt reactors and the well, there are not good models for that are out there at high fidelity for modeling the chemistry, and especially with a fuel salt and how the fuel interacts with the other constituents. So this there are other scopes that have been awarded in the past and where there's ongoing work that are generating data on molten salt chemistry. But we're really looking for someone to propose a synthesization of data that takes into account the thermodynamic, the thermophysical, and corrosion data into a high quality validated database. This would need to be in a standard format that could be used by many. We understand that to do this, there may need to be some limited experimentation done, but that's not the focus here. We are looking for folks to identify specific gaps in existing models and databases and how they propose to address that. Okay, so then we move into the MS-NEAMS area. We have, I believe, one scope of work in this area. This is on the SAM code, baseline development for that code. And there are two parts to this scope. One is multi-scale thermal fluid simulation. So we're looking for robust and accurate schemes for coupling the 1D system codes and 3D computational fluid dynamics codes at the fluid-to-fluid interface. So there's a lot of loose coupling approaches in the literature. We're looking for more tightly coupled schemes. This could also include the coupling schemes of conjugate heat transfer between 2D structure and 3D fluid flow. We are looking for direct comparison of existing or new data sets with simulations that use the NEAMS codes, specifically the SAM and NEC 5000 codes. And we're not looking for pure CFD validation experiments, which we've done either in other scopes in the past or are doing elsewhere. The other part of this scope is to integrate material models into the SAM code. So developing computationally efficient material models for advanced reactors for use in safety assessment. Looking to integrate phenomena that are important to advanced reactor licensing, things like tritium transport, source term evaluation, and then looking for proposals that implement those models in the systems level code. We're not seeking new experimental data on transport, on material transport and modeling. So this is one of those instances where I'll put some of these specifics into the scope of work in the next edit, so do be watching for that. All right, so as we get to the two IRP scopes that we have for modeling and simulation, I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of what we're trying to achieve here. This may or may not be different. It's at least different for us, but we really want to try to encourage university involvement in the program and the execution of the program at a more a more integrated level, more tightly coupled, involved in the discussions that we have about what the scope should be, what the areas of emphasis should be, and to help execute that as well. So these are not highly specific scopes of work. We're really after identification of strong teams that can work in this area, but can also have the ability to adjust over these 3-year periods as the emphasis may change within the program. But we would be looking for these the participants on these IRPs to really function as a part of the program, to be representing the program in meetings outside of our internal meetings, to be describing and defending the scope that the program is pursuing. So there are 2 separate scopes here. Each of them would be $3 million over 3 years. So the first one is in thermal hydraulics, thermal fluids applications. We stood up in the NEAMS program what we called a Center for Thermal Fluids Applications. This was back in the spring of 2018. The purpose of the center was to really create a front door for industry stakeholders, primarily, also NRC, for them to be able to access the thermal hydraulics capabilities that we have, modeling and simulation capabilities, and to influence the work that we're doing in that area. With this center, we talk about it as being pragmatically multi-scale, trying to go through the multi-scale and multi-physics approach that I outlined earlier, with fuel as the example, but in this case, thermal hydraulics. A lot of CFD codes can be very cumbersome, so that's not what you're going to run on your day-to-day simulations or on your laptop, but we want to have the ability to investigate phenomena at that lower level and fold them into engineering faster running codes. So we really want the scope under this IRP to clearly articulate the university team and how their experience in this area working with this kind of approach, and how they would propose to integrate with the program. We are looking for contributions to CFD framework for simulation of single phase flow. This with the primary goal of facilitating the design and assessment of advanced reactors. And also the proposals in this area, again, need to use the existing codes that we already have out there, as opposed to developing new codes or using an outside code and adding models to that. I don't have a problem with that being where you start, but the outcome of the work needs to fold the models into the codes that we are actively working on. So in a similar fashion, we have a second IRP on multi-scale nuclear fuel performance. However, the focus of this area is less on the multi-scale and more on the fuel performance. It needs to be done with awareness of the multi-scale approach that we're using, but focusing on the engineering scale fuel performance models. We're looking for this group to become an integral part of the fuel performance part of the NEAMS program. So we're particularly looking for help in accelerating the development of the BISON code, which is our primary fuel performance code for advanced reactors. We would specifically like an emphasis on gas reactor particle fuel, as that's a very near-term need with several reactor types making use of it. We want the proposals to focus on developing capabilities to simulate the thermomechanical response of the particle fuel during expected scenarios. Also tracking fission gas and other radioisotopes. This group would need to engage with not only the NEAMS program, but also NRC and the nuclear industry to make sure that the work that we're doing elsewhere in the program and the work that's being done under this scope is relevant to the industry. So this work done under this scope, while it should be focused on the Bison code and incorporating models into the Bison code, it should also be done with the intention to integrate the Bison code with the others, our multi-physics approach that we have in the program, and that is also identified in that that CRAB framework, which is the NRC slide I referred to earlier. Okay, so those were the scopes that are more specific to the NEAMS program. These next two, while I am kind of the caretaker for this area, they're not specific to modeling and simulation, although that's where you'd use a lot of nuclear data and benchmark evaluations. But I am working with the other parts of the Office of Nuclear Energy as we receive proposals to make sure that the reactor type that one of these might be useful to is a priority for those areas. So we have two scopes in this area. The first one has to do with benchmarking. This is the MS-NE-1 scope. So a little bit of background here on these two international benchmarks, International Criticality Safety Benchmark Evaluation Project and the International Reactor Physics Evaluation Project. So these are both OECD, NEA international activities, long-running focus on updating and publishing handbooks that support the characterization of reactor core methods, neutronics components, multiphysics measurements, validation of the nuclear data, and are useful in reactor and criticality safety. This has been a long-running scope, I think, at least for a couple of years previous, and continues into this area, into this year. So hopefully you're fairly familiar with these benchmark projects. This is another way of kind of representing it. So these benchmarking projects are important to take data that may be in various forms, consolidate it, have it peer reviewed for quality and establish a certain quality level, and then be able to get it out and be used with some knowledge and confidence. So as I mentioned before, this work scope is the same as what was in the call last year. One thing I really wanted to highlight is one question has come up about whether this was only single physics or multi-physics benchmarks were allowed. So I've put a note at the bottom here that yes, multi-physics benchmarks are allowed. I really want to encourage you to take a look at other projects that have been awarded, whether it's within the CINR framework or outside. Please make a case when you propose in both of these areas as to what the need or the gap is. Make it very clear what this benchmark, in the case of benchmarks, what that will be most helpful for, so we can really evaluate the impact that your proposal would bring. The second scope area is nuclear data. So again, this is the same scope of work that we had last year. So please look at the awards that either have been or will be announced soon, as the case may be, within the CINR framework. But also there is an agency-wide activity that is run by the Office of Science or led by the Office of Science. The Office of Nuclear Energy and NNSA also participate in those calls. Their call is includes both laboratories and universities. We only participate in the laboratory side of that call because we have this scope of work under the CINR. So here we've recognized over time that as libraries get updated, databases get updated, in improving some areas of that database, it may create problems in others. So also there are just in some areas uncertainties that are important for some of these advanced reactor concepts. And so as you propose work in this area, please identify what those gaps are clearly and what the impact on reactor operation or safety or licensing impacts would be. So this is as I said, the same scope of work as last year. When I put this scope out, I didn't have a technical point of contact listed here. That'll be Brad Reardon, who was also the technical point of contact last year. So just pay attention to what's already been awarded, and please highlight the impact of the nuclear data that you're looking to improve or supplement. There was something else I was going to say on this slide. Yesterday there was a scope of work under the MSR and reactor concepts. And so I wanted to kind of clarify how this nuclear data work relates to the work under that scope. So here we're talking about actual generation or analysis and improvement of nuclear data. In that other scope of work under the reactor concepts area, that is looking at capability development or capability enhancement for nuclear data purposes. So that other scope is about capability. This scope is about the actual nuclear data. So I know a question came up on that yesterday, so I wanted to clarify that as well. So that is my last slide, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Okay, if attendees have questions, if you'd please type your question into the GoToWebinar application. We'll ask them here in the room. And our very first question is for NEAMS-3, and it says, which salt is preferred, chlorides or fluorides?
I don't think there is a preference. The one thing that I would ask you to do, and this is in the scope of work that we put out, is very clearly identify which salt, the exact composition, the exact properties and conditions that you're going to that you're proposing. There's not a preference on which one you use, but be clear about what it is and what you're going to do with it.
Okay, and IRP-NEAMS-1.2 is titled as Multi-Scale Nuclear Fuel Performance, but the last priority mentioned proposal should focus on multi-physics rather than multi-scale methods. Could you clarify this?
Okay, so what I would say is the best clarification is as opposed to focusing on the progression from atomistic scale to engineering scale, that's well in hand within the program. So work in this area should focus rather on the engineering scale code applications, models into the engineering scale code, BISON, and its coupling to other codes. So that's the multi-physics versus the multi-scale.
In NEAMS-1, what is cutoff number of multi-group cross-section? 100 or 1,000?
I don't know. I'll have to get back to you with written comments on that. If I understand the question, I don't know that we have a cutoff, but we should respond in writing.
Okay. Is NEAMS-2 mainly an experimental work, or are you also looking at wall functions, modeling, and experimental data analytics?
Okay, I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Is NEAMS-2 mainly an experimental work, or are you also looking at wall functions, modeling, and experimental data analytics? Sorry.
Yeah, I think the answer is that it's the latter. It's both the experimentation and getting experimental data and folding that into the models. So not just one or the other. It's going to need to involve both.
Okay, we don't have any more questions right now. Let's hold on for about 30 seconds and then we'll see if any more come in. Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have today for Dave Henderson. And then after lunch, we're going to take a lunch break now, and then at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll resume with the NE2 work scope. Thank you.